Hey gamers, I'm Chris and this is Treantmonk's Temple, the place where knowledge is power. So we're on to 5th level spells already. I can't believe it's already halfway over. And speaking of halfway over, some people have asked me about cantrips and whether I'm going to be doing an overrated, underrated for cantrips. And I probably won't, just because I don't think I have a lot of new things to say about them. I'm just going to repeat things that we've already talked about 100 times before. So I'll probably skip those. And once the spells are done, then we'll start talking about classes and archetypes and other character options. So, that said, 5th level spells. Which ones are the best? Which ones are the worst? Which ones are the most overrated? Which ones are the most underrated? Coming right up, let's get started. So let's get started with our worst spells at 5th level. Now, 5th level is a level where we start to get some really great wall spells. I mean, we have Wall of Force, we have Wall of Stone, we have Wall of Light. 3 guesses what the crappy one of those is. Yeah, Wall of Light sucks. Wall of Light isn't, of course, a real wall. It's a wall. You know, it blocks your vision because we couldn't do that with a cantrip. And it sheds some light because we couldn't do that with a cantrip. No, we were much better using a 5th level slot and our concentration to do that. So this creates this crappy wall, and then creatures that are inside that wall make a Constitution saving throw because why target a weak save? And if they fail that saving throw, they're going to take 4d8 damage, not 4d8, that would be good, 4d8 damage with a 5th level spell, and they're blinded. If they are blinded, then we'll give them another save next round so that they're not blinded anymore. Now, after that, every round that a creature chooses to end its turn inside the wall, it'll take another 4d8 damage because creatures always like to end their turn in a place where they're going to take damage. And finally, this is just the real cherry on the crap sundae. You can use your action every round to make an attack roll against a creature, and if you succeed, they'll take 4d8 radiant damage. So if you miss, of course, nothing, right? You just wasted your action. And if you hit, you wasted your action too, because you did 4d8 damage, which at 5th level, come on, that's awful. 5th level spells. Now, 4d8 damage, and then the wall reduces by 10 feet. So after 6 times doing that, then the wall is gone and you've lost your spell entirely, which is maybe a good thing because at least you get rid of this stupid thing. So what's our second worst spell at 5th level? Well, our second worst spell at 5th level is Innervation. Innervation is awful. Innervation is a spell, it's 60-foot range. You target a creature with it, they make a dexterity save, and if they fail their save, they take 4d8 damage. Yeah, 4d8 again. That's like our jinxed number. If they make their save, they take 2d8, which is, it's not nothing, but it's close enough to nothing at this level. So they fail their save, they take 4d8 damage. You use your concentration, and then the following round you can use your action to give them another 4d8 damage. So it's Witch Bolt all over again. Okay, now, if they don't like that, they can go undercover, or they can go out of your range, and any of those breaks the spell. I guess the only thing the thing that's supposed to make this spell somewhat good is you get half the damage you do in healing, but that's crappy healing. And I think it's because they figure, here's a wizard spell that restores hit points, so we're going to make it suck because it's so great for a wizard to restore hit points. But we've talked about in the previous videos, there's other ways that a wizard can restore hit points. This is a terrible way to do it. Bad damage, bad range, uses your concentration, uses your action every round. There's just nothing going here. This spell is second worst. So that brings us to our worst spell at 5th level. And our worst spell at 5th level, if you compare it to Innervation, to Wall of Light, it makes those spells look terrific. This spell is that bad. And the spell is Immolation. Immolation is a spell that you target a creature. If it fails a dex saving throw, it takes 8d6 fire damage, and if it succeeds, it takes half damage. Now you might think, well, that sounds familiar. And the reason is because that's how much damage a fireball does at 3rd level. Except a fireball does it to a whole bunch of creatures. This does it to one creature, and it's a 5th level spell. Now it uses your concentration too, which a fireball does not. And this is what it uses your concentration for. So that on following rounds, that creature that failed its saving throw now takes 46 damage. As a 3rd level spell, this would be worse than Fireball. This would be a fair bit worse than Fireball. But as a 5th level spell, this is a disgrace. Now here's the worst thing of all. This spell was released with the Elemental Player's Companion back with the Princes of the Apocalypse release. And then, 2 years went by? And then this spell was re-released in Xanathar's, but unlike a lot of other Elemental Evil spells, this one was unchanged. They didn't make it better at all. They just kept it, this terrible, awful spell. Now, they've had enough time, more than enough time, to go through playtests and see how terrible mechanically this spell is. And it's objectively awful. Now, 5th level is the level where Rangers and Paladins have reached the pinnacle of their spellcasting ability. Their highest level spells are 5th level spells. And I'm glad to say we get to put a Paladin spell on our best list for 5th level. Because my choice for 3rd best spell at 5th level is Circle of Power. Circle of Power will emanate 30 feet from your Paladin using their concentration. And 30 feet is big enough that it's probably going to get all your allies in it. And all the allies within that 30 feet are going to get advantage on all saves versus magic. Now, at this level, saves versus magic are pretty common. And often you know when they're coming, so you even know when to use this spell. Now, if you have this spell up, and an ally is hit with a magical effect, if they make their saving throw, if it normally would have some kind of partial effect like a fireball, it has no effect. So this is additionally good because at this level, all your allies that are spellcasters are probably concentrating on something. So by giving them this ability, if they make their saving throw, which they get with advantage, and then they take no effect, then that means no concentration save. So you're probably helping all the spellcasters keep up all those amazing spells that they have at this level. So let's move on to our 2nd best spell at 5th level. I don't think I'll surprise anyone when I pick Animate Objects. Now we've talked a lot about spells that do damage, but this is a spell that does great damage. This spell, if you choose 10 tiny objects to animate, will do 10d4 plus 40 damage around, potentially, on hits. So 10d4 plus 40 damage. Just think a bit about how many spells we talked about already that do 4d8 damage or 4d6 damage. That 4d6 damage, you know how much average damage that is? 14. 48 damage? 18. This is 40 plus 10d4. So that's 65 average damage. 65 every round using your bonus action. Now I did a character building guide a few weeks ago where I did a guide for a wizard where I chose animate objects, and somebody criticized that taking animate objects in tier 3, and for those who aren't familiar with Adventure League, tier 3 starts at 11th level. To take animate objects at that point was pointless because creatures were all resistant to the damage. Well, so I did a little check on that. So what I decided to do is do a little bit of research on D&D Beyond. So as you can see here, I've gone to the monster section and I've done a filter for everything challenge rating 11 to 30. So that's all monsters of challenge rating 11 or higher in any of the official sources. So I completed that filter and I found that there were 8 pages worth of creatures. So 8 pages worth of enemies, challenge rating 11 or higher. So then the next thing I did is I went back into my filter and I picked out the resistances, every single resistance for bludgeoning. So you can see here it includes bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks that aren't silvered, etc., etc., etc. This is everything that includes bludgeoning of any kind. And refiltered, and I found that there were suddenly 4 pages of monsters. So approximately half the monsters, challenge rating 11 or higher, have resistance to bludgeoning of some kind. So that means half the creatures have no resistance, which means half the creatures are still getting that effective 65 points of damage on hits with this spell. So what that means is that even at high levels, this spell is working against half the opponents. And by working, I mean working at full effect. Against those other opponents that have resistance to bludgeoning damage, well, it's doing half damage. Well, half of 65 is 32. 32 isn't bad damage using your bonus action. Now, at this level, I wouldn't condone using your bonus action and your concentration to do 32, 33 points of damage around. That's probably not worth it. But it's not terrible. It's still better than a lot of those other spells that we talked about earlier. And quite often you even know which creatures have resistance and which ones don't. So if you know a creature has resistance, of course you're going to choose something else. But there's still going to be lots of creatures you can choose that aren't going to have resistance at all. And if I don't mention the fact that this spell has some versatility, some people are going to point it out to me. So this spell does have some versatility. You have a giant statue that needs to be moved. You can't possibly carry it. Well, you can cast animate objects on it and have it walk away for you. And then maybe there's a door that you need to open, and that statue can just bust that door open for you. Those kinds of little things, they're all pretty circumstantial. This is mainly a spell that's going to be effective for you as a combat spell. So that brings us to our number 1 spell at 5th level. Now, I didn't really have a choice for my number 1 spell because this is a spell that changes everything. We've had this conversation over the last couple levels of spells about spells that target large number of creatures versus single creatures. And I've had a bias against spells that target single creatures because they always get a saving throw. And if they make their saving throw, usually nothing happens, right? And so what ends up happening is it's all or nothing. They make their save and nothing happens. They fail their save, you win. But with 5th level, now we get Wall of Force. And with Wall of Force, now you just win. Let's skip the saving throw. And this becomes more and more important as we go up in levels because we're starting to fight more creatures with magic resistance. And more importantly, legendary resistance. Legendary resistance means you can fail a save and then choose to succeed it instead. So if you cast Banishment, say, on a dragon, try their saving throw, fail, and then just choose to succeed. But if you do Wall of Force, they get no save. So they're sitting in their Wall of Force, completely out of the fight, with all their legendary resistances, doing them no good at all. Now you can deal with their minions. They can't get out. It's indestructible, and nothing can physically go through it. So that's that. Unless they have Dispel Magic or Disintegrate, they're done. You can surround the Wall of Force, get everyone healed up, make sure you're flanking them, make sure you're in a position where they can't hit more than one at a time with their breath weapon, drop the Wall of Force, finish them off, right? So basically, this is a spell that just makes the end of the fight assured to be your victory. And if you can have a spell that automatically wins fights, it has to be number 1. So now let's talk about our most overrated spells at 5th level. My choice for number 3 for most overrated spells is Flame Strike. Now, I take Flame Strike myself sometimes with a cleric. I can't help it because I have guilty pleasure of the occasional kaboom, right? And Flame Strike is the first kaboom spell that a cleric really gets. But that said, it does 8d6 damage or a dex save for half. And if that sounds familiar, that's because wizards and sorcerers got this kind of spell 2 levels ago. But worse than that, their spell does a 20-foot radius. This spell does a 10-foot radius. It's got this column that goes way up because, creatures always stack upwards, right? It's kind of useless. It has this what it really has is it's a 10-foot radius, meaning it's going to cover less than half as many squares, quite a bit less than half as many squares as a fireball is going to cover, right? Half the damage is radiant because I guess we're supposed to think that if creatures are resistant to fire, that's some kind of big advantage, that we're doing 46 full damage and 46 half damage. That's just still really bad. So we're talking 5th level spell. Oh, and the range isn't as good as a fireball either. So we're going to get 2 levels higher for a spell that's going to cover a smaller area, lower range, not good spell, and people still think it's good, right? And I think it's because it's on the cleric list. Is that why? And the druid list, and people are like, ooh, these kinds of spells are hard to get for those kinds of classes. So that brings us to our second most overrated spell at 5th level. I won't surprise anyone here, I don't think, because I'm going to choose Hold Monster. Hold Monster, of course, is a spell that I'm going to pick because it targets a single creature, provides them a saving throw, and if they make their saving throw, nothing happens. Worse than that, though, they're getting a saving throw every round, so even if they miss the first save, they'll get another saving throw next round. Now, what I've been told over and over and over again for years now is that, but Treantmonk, don't you understand? If they fail their save, they're paralyzed. And paralyzed is the worst condition you can have. You can have advantage on all your attacks against them. They can literally do nothing. So it's so great a condition to impose on somebody. It's okay that it gives them a save or does nothing. It's okay that it gives them a save every round because that effect is so great. I don't buy that at all from a tactical viewpoint. This is why. Because I'll take a spell that will give me the win over a spell that might give me the win easy. Hold Monster could make it really easy, or it could completely fail and now we're in trouble. This isn't a good deal for PCs. We're expected to win the fight. The odds are with us to begin with. DMs don't make encounters thinking, this is how I'm going to kill the PCs. They just want to challenge us. The idea of a fight is that the odds are stacked in favor of the PCs. So it doesn't matter if you can win a fight easy. All that matters is, can you win the fight? And if you can win the fight using a spell, then that's a good use of a spell. But if you're going to gamble that to make it either an easy win or a tough fight, that's a terrible gamble. You shouldn't make those kind of gambles. So for our number one most overrated spell at 5th level, I'm going to have to come back to it because I'm going to have a big rant about it because it's something that infuriates me. So instead, we're going to go on to our most underrated spells, talk about some good spells, and I'm going to surprise a lot of people with my third choice because my third choice for most underrated at 5th level is Banishing Smite. Now, if you are thinking, didn't he put Banish on his most overrated spell list last level? Yes, I did. The reason I'm considering Banishing Smite an underrated spell is because I hear all the time about people talking about Banishment and how good it is, and I never hear them talking about Banishing Smite and how good it is. And Banishing Smite, in my opinion, is a significantly better spell. Now, it's a higher level, but it deserves to be that higher level, and it deserves to get some praise. And here's why. First off, for the most part, smite spells are not good, right? And so it's fine to assume that most smite spells are bad, but you should read them because sometimes there is an exception, and this is one. First off, it doesn't restrict you to melee attack, which means you can use this with a bow, right? And that's pretty good. Number two, it does 5d10 force damage in addition to your regular attack and all your regular damage bonuses. So in the end, you're doing a lot of damage. And yes, you can combine this with a regular smite if you want to do just a ton of damage. And then, if you've taken them to 50 hit points or less, they're banished. Just like with the smite spell, except unlike the smite spell, they're not going to get a saving throw. But you do have to get them to that 50 hit points. And sometimes that's hard to guess when you're going to get there, right? So it's not perfect. But if you get them to 50 hit points, they're gone, no save, no legendary resistance or anything like that. And then it's treated just like a banishment after that. So there's a lot of reasons why this is the best of all the smite spells there is. And it's probably the only one I think is a very good smite spell. So that brings us to our second most underrated spell at 5th level. I had to go kind of back and forth. Is this spell really underrated? But yeah, some people really do underrate this spell. Take my word for it. The spell is Awaken, right? Awaken is a spell where you cast it on a plant, and the plant becomes intelligent. And some people think that's kind of where it ends. But what this spell really does is it gives you that action economy advantage. And we've talked about the advantage of the action economy before. With spells like Find Familiar, anything that can give you actions has a significant impact. Well, if you cast this, say, on a tree, that tree becomes charmed by you for the next 30 days. So basically, that tree has 59 hit points. It can attack in combat. It can take other actions. It's intelligent. And it'll do whatever it figures you want it to do. So it gives you extra actions every fight. And it'll do so for 30 days. Right? You're not using your concentration or anything like that. And then, according to the spell, after the 30 days, it decides whether it's going to continue to like you or not based on how you treated it. So it's not like other charm spells where it's automatically hostile to you. You could have an extra pet in your party permanently that just constantly gives you additional actions. Can feed people the healing potions, or do the help action, or just straight out attack in combat over and over and over again without impeding anything else you do. Costs 1,000 gold pieces. So worth it. 1,000 gold pieces for a month of an additional party member. That brings us to our most underrated spell at 5th level. And my choice, if you have never heard of it before, you're forgiven, because it's fairly obscure. And if you have heard of it before, you've probably heard it's not very good, or it sounds better than it is. And that spell is Anti-Life Shell. So Anti-Life Shell is a druid spell, and what it does is if you're a druid, you cast this spell, uses your concentration, lasts up to an hour. What happens is you get a 10-foot radius around you where no living creature can enter. And if they're in that area when you cast a spell, they're pushed out. So what it keeps is from anything from entering melee with you, unless they're not living, so they're like undead or constructs or something like that. Now, the reason I think this spell is underrated is I don't think people have considered all the tactical applications of a spell like this. Because there's no save, it's essentially a force field. And what you can do is by positioning yourself in the right place, you can severely restrict enemy movement. This can be used to protect other players. This can be used to block exits. This can be used to do all kinds of things. Protect your archers. By placing yourself in between enemies and whatever it is you don't want them to get to. I couldn't possibly list all the tactical applications of preventing an enemy from moving somewhere you don't want them to move with no saving throw. But if you think about it, I'm sure you can think of a couple off the top of your head right now. Okay, people give this a terrible rating in general on lists that I've seen. It deserves much, much better than that. No save, restricts movement. That's useful. Is it one of the best spells at 5th level? No, I didn't even consider it as one of the best spells at 5th level. But underrated? Absolutely underrated. So now I want to talk about the most overrated spell at 5th level. And I got a bit of a rant here, because this isn't like other overrated spells. Most overrated spells, what happens is a player hears they're really good, and especially something like a new player. Maybe they read something online and this spell's really good, and they take it and they use it, and maybe they're a little bit disappointed by it, but it's one spell, no big deal. If they don't like it, they can cast something else, and their character's still okay. But this particular spell gets combined with a character build that's bad, and it's sold as good by people who've clearly never played it or looked at the numbers. And to this day, it gets recommended to new players as the ultimate build for archers. And that spell is Swift Quiver. And the build they're talking about is using it with a Valor Bard, magical secrets at level 10, to make the ultimate archer. Okay, but here's the problem. Bards are not good archers. Here's why. A bard, first off, has no bonus to archery, right? They can't get the archery combat style. They don't get extra feats, so they can't take things like sharpshooter. You can take a Valor Bard, and you get proficiency with longbow, and you get an extra attack at level 6, and that's it, right? And the Bard spell list isn't any real help to you, because there are no spells on the entire Bard spell list. And I didn't even realize this myself until I had really looked into the spell lists of the various character classes. But I did that back in 2014, right? It's 2018 now. We should know by now that the Bard has no spells that add to damage of weapons.
I see.
I'm sure you don't, but it's very nice of you to try.
No magic weapon, no hex, no hunter's mark, no divine favor, no smite spells, nothing. Right? So what you end up with is somebody who is counting on their dex and their dex alone to be a good archer. And if you compare that to what other classes get, things like action surge and the archery combat feat and sharpshooter and the various spells that I just mentioned and other bonuses to damage like combat maneuvers or arcane arrows or all the various other things that can make archery useful for other classes, the bard ends up so far behind for those first 9 levels that they end up sucking. And the thing is that because you've gone the archery route, that means at level 4, you kind of have to raise your dex or take sharpshooter, right? And so that you're not raising your charisma. And then level 8 comes and you have to do the same thing again. So now you're still working off the same charisma you had at level 1 when other casters are now at a 20 in their primary casting stat. And you're still not a good archer. You've spent 9 levels of being a crappy archer. And not only have you spent 9 levels of being a crappy archer, level 5 was particularly painful, wasn't it? Like when everyone else was shooting twice better than your single shot. That was really painful. But then after that, level 6, you caught up a little bit, so now you're just worse than everybody else. So you're just worse for 9 levels. Now you get Swift Quiver. Now you're supposed to be amazing, right? But you're not. And this is why you're not. You cast this once a day, maybe twice a day at higher level. And your first round of combat, what happens? Well, you use your action to cast this spell. So now you get your bonus action, and this spell lets you shoot 2 arrows. So you get just as many arrows as you would have had if you hadn't cast this spell. Then on the following rounds, you can shoot 4 arrows around it. And this is kind of the whole draw of this. Bard can shoot 4 arrows around a 10th level. Yeah, in one combat, starting on the second round, and these are unenhanced arrows. There's nothing to them. They get a d8 plus your dex, and that's it, right? So what you end up with is a fighter can do more damage with 2 arrows than you can do with 4. And then one more level, now the fighter's attacking 3 times every round. And then they action surge, and they're attacking 6 times in a round. And they can do that on the first round. Well, you're firing 2 crappy arrows. So you never catch up. You're never a good archer. And this spell doesn't make you a good archer. So you've spent 10 levels of investment and making bad bard decisions. Because the bard is a good class. Bard has good spell list. So if you concentrate on your charisma, you can be an effective caster with a bard. But you've chosen not to do that because somebody's told you that you can make this ultimate archer. And you can't. But it takes you an entire campaign to figure out.
Your mind is beginning to work. It's entirely due to my influence, of course. You mustn't take any credit.
By the time you figured it out, it's too late. And the thing is that people have told you, people you trusted. And I've seen videos on this just months ago saying that this is still a great build. It's not a great build. The numbers don't back it up. And new players, please don't listen. You want to make an ultimate archer? Make a fighter. Now, I'm all done. Let's move on. Hey, that's it. We've done our list. We've done our best. We've done our worst. We've done our most overrated. We've done our most underrated. We've done that horrible exploit that is no good. By the way, if you're a ranger and you're high level and you want to take Swift Quiver, yeah, then it's okay. But Valor Bards, don't do it. Okay, all done. Now, let's just sit back and relax and have some fun. Because D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.